Today I would like to talk about some of the advices that we see here and there on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and all that stuff. And I would like to talk about why we fail to become fluent in English. Normally, the common advices that we get from teachers, from tutors and all that stuff, do shadowing, right? This is the first thing, like in order to improve our pronunciation, in order to improve our speaking skill.
It's just weird when your life literally just changes.
It's just weird when your life literally changes. Now, obviously you can do shadowing, but the problem is, does it make you speak English fluently? No. That didn't make you speak English fluently. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. I don't know. If you're speaking English fluently, I don't know why you're watching this video. Shadowing didn't work in order to improve your speaking skill, not the pronunciation, because shadowing works for pronunciation, obviously. Okay, so basically, shadowing doesn't make you speak English fluently. One of the common advices that I was getting at the time before I started learning English was watch TV shows. Watch TV shows, Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Game of Thrones, random TV shows. And I was like, okay, since everybody's giving this advice, I was like, I can learn English, I guess, by watching TV shows. But you're watching a TV show, obviously, with your first language first, and then with English subtitles. And then as you're watching the TV show, first of all, you come across so many words that you don't know, depending on your level. You spend your time looking up those words in the dictionary one by one. You write down the meaning of those words in your notebook or something. And it's just getting frustrating, all the time coming across a word that you don't know. You try to learn their pronunciation, you try to learn their meanings, but the problem is you don't improve your speaking skill. That process doesn't make you speak English fluently. And reading a book. They say read a book. Now, obviously, when I was a kid, when I was growing up, I used to read a lot of books, and I tried to read books in English as well. And I tried to learn English by reading a book. But reading books didn't make any difference in my whole English learning process. First of all, while you're reading a book, let's say you come across tons of words, you look them up and you take a note of those words, and you end up forgetting half of those words, their meanings. On the other hand, the most important thing is reading books doesn't make you speak English fluently. Like, I was reading books, bunch of books, but it didn't make any difference. I wasn't even able to say the most basic sentence in English. You read books, but even reading a book doesn't make you speak English fluently, because most of the time we don't speak in a way that books are written. I tried to learn making a list of words, memorizing words. For instance, I made a very long list of words, like 1,000 words from Game of Thrones, from The Lord of the Rings, from Harry Potter. As you can see, guys, those list of words, while I was reading The Lord of the Rings and The Book Thief, I was doing those list of words, okay? Long list of words. I made those very long list of words. I spent so much time looking up words in the dictionary, and it just didn't work for me. First, I tried to learn English by reading a book, but it didn't work for me. And then I tried to learn English by watching TV shows like Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, How I Met Your Mother, Friends, and it didn't work for me. I tried to learn English by doing shadowing. It just didn't work for me. I felt like no matter what I do, it just doesn't work. I want to be speaking English fluently, but I'm not even able to make one simple sentence in English. And one day I thought to myself, okay, why did I download the subtitles of my favorite TV shows? I downloaded those subtitles. I got the script of those subtitles, and I started reading those lines. First of all, I look up the words in the dictionary that I didn't know at the time, and I wrote down the meaning of those words right next to those lines. For those of you who ask me, do you make list of words? Do you use any flashcards? No. You just look up the words that you don't know. You just write down the meaning of those words right next to those lines, all in one place, all in one place. And that's it. As a first attempt, I tried to learn English by reading those lines. First of all, my first attempt was to learn English by reading the scripts of TV shows or movies. But at the end of the day, after spending a month or 2 months, I felt like, okay, I was making no progress. I felt like I was forgetting many of the words that I was learning from reading the scripts of those TV shows or movies. And one day, I thought to myself, all of a sudden I got this urge to repeat the lines of the characters, first looking at the scripts and then without looking at the scripts, like an actor. That's when my life changed.
It says to call this number if you're not completely satisfied with this candy bar. not completely satisfied.
It says to call this number if you're not completely satisfied with this candy bar. It says to call this number if you're not completely satisfied with this candy bar. Well, I'm not completely satisfied. Well, I'm not completely satisfied.
Well, I'm not completely satisfied. Hold on. Fill these out. Sit over there.
Hold on. Fill this out. Sit over there. I always get this comment saying like, oh, what is the difference between shadowing and your method? It seems same to me. Now, let me explain the difference between shadowing and script method, because shadowing and script method are completely different. Okay, when you do shadowing, you repeat the lines right after you hear the lines. So basically, you're in a parrot mode.
My mom came down and we had a birthday celebration. It was really great.
My mom came down and we had a birthday celebration and it was really great. You hear the lines and then afterwards, you repeat them. You mainly pay attention to the pronunciation and accent.
Wearable tech will only get like broad usage.
Wearable tech will only get like broad usage. Basically, your focus is always on the pronunciation of the words and accent. So you pay attention to the listening. You pay attention to the scene, image, and motion. Basically, while you're doing shadowing, you're watching the character, maybe from a YouTube video, maybe from a TV show. So basically, you're distracted by the images and scenes and motions.
Of course, Jack is so elusive. He's like, yeah, I know, J.J. Abrams, we're friends. I was like, well, then you must come.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, J.J. Abrams, we're friends. Then you must come. So you don't challenge yourself to speak because you repeat the sentences like a parrot right after you hear them. And shadowing is a language learning technique where you repeat an audio just after you hear it. So basically there is no force, there is no effort that you put into speaking English because you just repeat it after you hear it. Okay, let's talk about learning English with scripts. First of all, when you practice with the scripts, you don't use your phone or your PC while practicing with scripts. You try to remember and visualize a scene in your head while saying the lines from the scripts.
Isn't this amazing? I mean, I have never made coffee before in my entire life.
That is amazing.
Isn't this amazing? Isn't this amazing? I mean, I never made coffee before in my life. That is amazing. That is amazing. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So basically, you're not distracted by visual effects or the sounds or voices, etc. You're completely focused on speaking English. You try to speak first, looking at the scripts, and then without looking at the scripts. So basically, you force yourself to speak without looking at the scripts. So when you force yourself to form the sentences without getting any help, your brain starts to learn how to make the sentences in another language. You're not in a parrot mode because you don't repeat the lines after you hear them. So you fully pay attention to speaking because you're not using your PC or your phone. You're not distracted by the scenes, images, or motions. And while practicing with the scripts, you automatically remember the scenes. This helps you train your brain to understand how to speak in real life situations.
I cleaned. I did the windows. I did the floors.
Look, I cleaned. I did the windows. I did the floors. Look, I cleaned. I did the windows. I did the floors. And when you practice with scripts, you visualize the scene in your head. That helps you to remember some of the words and lines for the long term without memorization. So basically, my methods, aka methods, script method is a method where you repeat the lines from the scripts without using any visual or sound effects. This technique activates your brain to remember the scenes from the video and play out the scene in your heads while saying the lines without looking at the scripts. This is how you start to speak and form your own sentences over time. Me as a beginner was like this. I had a really great time last night. I was struggling. I was not able to say this line all at once. So I was feeling this need to look at the line one more time. I was repeating the line again by looking at the scripts. I had a really great time last night. And I was trying to repeat it again without looking at the script. This is not a memorization. You just try to understand what's going on and you try to repeat those dialogues as if you are the one who speak and who use those dialogues, you know? This was my goal, to repeat those lines without looking at the script as if I am the one who speak the language, who use the language. You need to force yourself to repeat those lines without looking at the scripts, okay? Because while I was teaching my students English with this method, they were constantly getting the desire to look at those lines and repeat those lines while they were looking at the scripts. They were really having a hard time to repeat those lines without looking at the scripts. Scripts are like you're trying to learn how to ride a bicycle with 4 wheels or 3 wheels. Scripts are like your supportive wheels, but as time goes on, you need to get rid of those wheels. If you just stick to those scripts, if you try to learn English by reading the lines off of these scripts, then you will be doomed forever to ride a bicycle with 4 wheels forever. So that means, aka, you will not be able to speak English fluently. Just keep this in mind. When I first started learning English and actually practicing English with the scripts of friends, I couldn't understand anything that I was hearing. For instance, I first watched a show with Turkish subtitles. I was a complete beginner in terms of listening skills. And on top of that, I wasn't quite able to understand the lines that I was reading from the scripts. When I started practicing with the script of friends by speaking, as I kept practicing with the script of friends by only speaking, I started understanding the lines better. My comprehension started expanding. And this is how I started understanding the show without subtitles over time. For me, speaking English came before understanding English, listening English. In my experience, I improved my speaking skill before I improved my listening skill. So that was my learn English process, guys. So the reason why I wanted to especially make this video is because reading doesn't work for me, watching TV shows didn't work for me, making list of words, memorizing words didn't work for me, doing shadowing didn't work for me, like didn't make me speak English fluently, and reading those scripts didn't work for me, but learning English like an actor with this method worked for me. And that was the only method that made me actually speak English fluently.
Kids, I gotta get to work. If I don't input those numbers, doesn't make much of a difference.
Alright kids, I gotta get to work. If I don't input those numbers, it doesn't make much of a difference.
So, like, you guys all have jobs?
Yeah, we all have jobs. See, that's how we buy stuff.
So like, you guys all have jobs? Yeah, we all have jobs. That's how we buy stuff.